How you doing?
I'm doing well, Joseph. How are you?
I'm doing great. Fantastic job on the film. I absolutely enjoyed it. Now,
Awesome.
based on the trailer, I know people can draw comparisons to Romeo and Juliet, but I think it's really a love letter to cinema in general, mainly cinema that I loved, especially in like the 90s. But what can you tell me about the premise without giving anything away?
Yeah, man, I love that you say that. That setup is so perfect. That was my vision going into it, kind of a love letter to cinema. And it's definitely a movie that's heartfelt, has heart and soul, has those familiar nods to like a Romeo and Juliet or kind of an over the top extravagant world that maybe could be seen in Shakespearean times. But yeah, done for a modern audience. And for me, what I just wanted to make a movie that was, what was on the page was this tongue-in-cheek, witty, kind of over the top, but still had this love. The love story to it was still at its core very heartfelt. And I was like, wow, this is the perfect opportunity to kind of dive into the nostalgic elements, those youthful elements of the movies that we loved growing up, and whether those are good movies or not. You know, like a lot of 90s movies, back in the day I would be like 90s movies, no, we're going to talk about 70s movies only, you know.
Right.
Now I'm like, no, this is a movie, this is a chance to, put in those elements of things that grabbed my attention subconsciously as when we watched movies. You weren't analyzing it the same way that we do now. We're so hard on ourselves and so hard on movies sometimes. And when you're a kid, you just like watch Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and you're like, that was awesome, And I wanted to incorporate as much of that into this experience as I could.
I want to talk about your script mainly because the script is so bold, and you obviously took it in a direction to really play off of the nostalgia of cinematic history. Was the script written that way? Was it always conceptualized that way?
It was. I mean, if the boys were here, Andrew and Gabe, the writers, they definitely they're so smart, they're so witty, they themselves are so bold, and you could tell they wanted to incorporate all those movies, that time in their life. They wrote it when they're in their 20s, now they're in their 30s, well, in their 30s. So it's like, how do we adapt this to make sure it feels relevant and isn't, one like tone deaf to anything that maybe, should be worked on. But it wasn't the kind of charm of it was that it was so playful and so bold in a way that was like, let the viewers kind of put themselves in. And, we all like to romanticize our lives. We all like to walk into a bar and pretend that it's in slow motion and the music is playing. Right. You know what I mean? We all kind of do that anyways. And that to me was in the script. It was on the page. It was, these characters were bold. Some characters were clear cut, good guys and bad guys. Some characters, the Wayne and Barbie, it's like, well, they're going to steal the show for sure. They had those movie moments and it was all there. I was just like, all right, how do I address this? How do I put my own stamp on it? And without it being just a Guy Ritchie, Tarantino wannabe or something, I was like, no, those movies were our high school, college movies, but how do we make that for young people now? All the people fresh off of Marvel movies, the 13 to 15-year-olds, 16, 17, who are like, what's out there? They'll find Fight Club, they'll find Pulp Fiction. They've probably seen them already, but it's like, well, this could be a nice little stepping stone to some of those movies. That's what it was on the page, and I just wanted to accentuate that.
I love that. Now, your previous films were gritty and grounded with a lot of drama and pretty heavy. How did this film kind of challenge you as a director?
Oh man, that's a good question because it did challenge me. Like my instincts as a director, I want to make all movies. I want to make all kinds. I don't want to limit myself to any one genre. Which was maybe a little selfish, but whatever. Like I always keep saying, I want to see a little of everything and try to dabble, in all of it. But for me, my instincts are always, I always say, it's so ironic because I'm always like, if this is the movie version of something, if this is the movie version of that character's costume or the movie version of that performance, then let's dial it down. Like if you're yelling, I want you to whisper. If you're out of 10, I want you to be out of 5, because my instincts are always, that's not real. That wouldn't happen. That doesn't happen in real life. And this movie forced me to do the opposite in a way. It's like, no, this guy's the antagonist, and that's a character, that's a thing that is in stories, and that's why storytelling is so fun and captivating. And not every movie has to be take you down some dark, heavy, brooding, path. Which again, I want to keep exploring that stuff too. But I think this movie. it had both in a way, because our two heroes, our two leads, the love is real, and I wanted to have a little bit of the groundedness in there, but everything else from there, I wanted it to just be larger than life in a way, and that was hard. That was really hard for me, because I was like, how do you balance this tone? What is this? Is it funny? Is this scene scary? Is this scene like, are they feeling the feels they need to feel? And I'm not gonna lie, that was, through the whole process, was a learning experience.
Now, it's funny. It's so funny that you brought that up, because it literally leads right into my next question. Now, as we said earlier, this is really an homage to cinema storytelling. Yeah. But I also feel like there's a modern day classic that called Streets of Fire that I get a vibe from. And I love that film. Can you talk to me about any films that you used as inspiration for either the look or the tone for Die in a Gunfight?
Absolutely. For me, it was definitely, you mentioned the 90s stuff. It's like, what I know, like for a minute there, we all were tackling 80s stuff. When you watch Tarantino and stuff, they're tackling their 60s and 70s stuff. You inject that into what you're doing, sometimes subconsciously. And I was like, okay, and not just me, but the producers and the writers, we all knew that True Romance was probably the biggest kind of inspiration, where it's like a 90s movie. It's totally, Gary Oldman could go sing and dance in that, and somehow, it's like so bizarre, but so amazing. And it's like, we wanted to try to tap into some of that, like what we loved about a movie like that. Or for me, I wanted to make sure too, if we had stuff like that, or had a little nod to the Leo, Claire Danes, Romeo and Juliet.
Oh yeah.
The energy of that, but I also wanted to make sure I wasn't just doing, mimicking that too much. For me, it was, though, as you can tell, they're all the 90s. I wanted some to grit a Fight Club. Some of the movies like Streets of Fire, like they're strange little cult movies that, again, I hope that people, for me, it was in high school. It was like the Donnie Darkos and Requiem for a Dream, the weird movies that you go like, find yourself watching with your friends on a Saturday night. Like, well, I've heard about this. It's weird. Let's watch it. Discussion. I wanted this to kind of be one of those movies for people, and I know that's kind of asking a lot, because you can't just go into something saying this is going to be a cult classic, but I wanted to feel like this is that self-awareness. Like, we know we're straight up mimicking those movies. Like, we're not ripping them off. We're trying to, like, I would have been like, no narration. You can't have narration in a movie. That's cheating. But now it's like, no, like, if this is Ben's, the lead character, Ben's movie, he's got to have narration, and it's got to be Billy Crudup, like, those are the things, it's all those inspirations that kind of just pushed us to be like, let's try it. Let's take a big swing and see what happens. Well,
that's exactly, like, as soon as the movie opened and we kind of get like this animated thing, as soon as it opened, I was like, oh yeah, I know, like, I'm going to enjoy this. Like, you're right. Like the True Romance, it totally is a new era version of these classic cult films, which I absolutely love. But I want to talk about some of the characters in this, because Diego Boneta and Alexandra Daddario, they're the heart and soul of this film. They play Ben Gibbon and Mary Rathcart. Can you talk about Ben and Mary and their complicated past?
Yeah, I love those characters. And the challenge for me was, I did not want to make, this isn't Romeo and Juliet. This isn't just these two starry-eyed, like, we love each other and we're going to run away together. And for me, casting them fell in line with this idea that they're not 16-year-olds. They're not naive. These are people who have tried to explore the world, tried to break free from their families, tried to make it work. But they've kind of been beaten up a little, literally. Ben, he lets himself be beaten up because he can't feel anything, all those things that go along with being young and wide-eyed to, like, wow, I can go do anything. And then you go do it and you're like, well, no, I can't. Like, it's hard, like you get beat down, and you sometimes have to retreat back into yourself or retreat back to what's comfortable. And Alex and Diego brought that kind of worldly, cultured element. Like, we've seen the world. This is Romeo and Juliet Part 2. They've lived past that. They've outgrown the naive romantic view of, like, Ben's character being like, he idolizes, Jim Morrison and Kurt Cobain and all these people that when you're naive and you're like, yeah, I'm going to die young. I'm going to die in a blaze of glory.
Right.
But then you're like, well, what happens when you live past that? And you're like, no, I got to grow up. Like life isn't that. That's a little toxic. That's not the way you should approach your life. You got to approach it with the longevity and hopes to bring something more than that. And that's what I like that they brought. They brought this heaviness of like kind of the standoffish, like, wait, what's your catch? Do we want to love each other again? Do we try to make this work again? And then once they do, they kind of get, wrapped up in the I guess the romanticized the movie version of it, but yeah, it's kind of that meta exploration of all those concepts, and I think that's what they brought that to it. They didn't just play it as like, yay, we're in love. They brought something heavier.
I hope that's something that doesn't get confused confused in terms of the Romeo and Juliet thing, mainly because it takes elements of Romeo and Juliet, but it flips it right on its head, which I absolutely was on board with all the way. Now, I love the backstories between Ben and Mary and McCool and the way that they're told through animation. What inspired that idea?
That honestly came out of one, we on a limited budget indie movie. You got to remember, this is still a small, in some ways, small film compared to these movies we're idolizing.
Sure.
I mean, and we had 23 days to make this. I had 23 days to make my other movies, which are just two people in a car, and this was like an ensemble piece with style. And it's like, what are we doing? And the brilliance of the people around me supporting me and supporting the story. We all knew what we were trying to make. We all were on board. So we all had ideas to try to tackle, creatively some of these not problems, but the hurdles that you got to get over while making movies. And one of them was we got hit with a pandemic, obviously, COVID.
Right.
We didn't have time while we were shooting. We finished before the pandemic hit in terms of principal photography, but we knew we were missing some pretty important backstory bits and side story bits and things that I was like, once we get the movie, something locked in place so people can see it, I know we're going to be able to, back in LA or whatever, kind of go shoot some of this stuff or touch some stuff up or whatever. Well, the pandemic hit and we were like, oh boy, how do we fill in these gaps? How do we bring more to this? And luckily we had plenty of time to edit and play around with all these wacky, crazy things that we hoped would work with the split screens and the narration, all that stuff. But we're like, well, how do we fix this? Out of nowhere, I remember one day, I think it was Andrew, one of the writers was like, well, what about animation? We've played with every movie trope, every nod to like French New Wave format playing. It's like, well, what are we missing? Animation. And luckily right off the bat, it's like, if we can get all that animation right up front and show people what they're getting into, whether they like that or not, right off the bat, they might be like, that's not my thing. This is a little out there for me. But it at least shows what we're trying to do. It shows the tone, it shows the colors, the vibrancy, the kind of tongue-in-cheek outlandishness. And it was like the icing on the cake with all these different formats. It's like, of course we have to have animation in this. I mean, if it was my way, I was just saying in another interview, like I would do more. I wish we had more, but it serves its purpose well, both thematically and tonally and just, in terms of just having fun with it.
Now, you guys created a ton of great outlier characters, but those characters don't suffer because the story doesn't feel stuffed, and every character is absolutely in there for a reason. But one of these characters, and where we get our title of the film, is when Ben runs into Wayne, played by Travis Fennell. And this is a different side of Travis that we're not really used to seeing. Can you talk to me about what Travis brought to the role of Wayne that wasn't on the page?
Yeah. I mean, the page was very different. It was literally, he was supposed to be like twice at that age. He was supposed to be an older, like walrus of a man. But regardless, on the page and what came of it, it was supposed to be the character that kind of steals the movie in a way. The character that you're like, what is this guy up to? Is he good? Is he bad? What is it? When is he going to pop back up again? He's the one that I wanted people to walk away.
Yeah, I love Wayne.
You know what I mean? You want to walk away and be like, dude, I want to dress up like him for Halloween or something, or have his poster on my wall. And of course, you need to get an actor that can match that level of energy and weirdness and take the bold risks. So, Travis, I didn't know a lot about him other than that he, was in Vikings and he was in all these upcoming things that showed he was this powerhouse force, like he was a commanding force on screen. And of course he's like got piercing blue eyes and he wants to take the character in so many weird ways. It was his idea to be like, come up with a weird haircut and have a little He has a little bee. It's a Barbie earring, and paint his nails. And he wanted to bring this kind of, he's a scary, colorful guy, his character, but at the same time, when you peel back the layers, he's a teddy bear. He's a big, soft teddy bear. And Travis knew exactly what he was doing going into this. Like he had a vision for it. And it was pretty much, for me, it was like, okay, I can just let him go play, let him play, and let our DP and our production designer use him as a tool and a prop to just make the movie pop. And yeah, Travis is amazing. He's not afraid he's fearless. He's one of those fearless actors.
That movie theater scene, I loved it. And then also another one is Justin Chatwin. Like his performance in this was amazing. Like a great performance. Also not used to seeing him play this type of role. But brilliant job on the film, Colin. I absolutely loved it. Thank you so much for talking to me. And I can't wait to tell everyone about this. I can't wait for everyone to see it.
That means a lot to me and to the whole team. We all had fun with it, and it's made for that. For people to just go have fun on a Saturday night. Take them back to the cinemas,
Absolutely. Thank you for your time. Amazing film. I appreciate it.
Appreciate it too. Have a good one.
You too. Take care.
Yeah, you too. Bye-bye.